Hi, this video is about large language models, LLMs, hitting the wall and the implications of that. In case you haven't heard, I shot a separate video about this, but Sam Altman recently stated that the age of giant models is over, which I think is a bit misleading. Basically, what he was saying was you can't improve anymore by just adding more data and more parameters. And this makes sense, and this is something that some people have predicted was coming because GPT-4 just captures so much of the data. They didn't release it, but if you look at like this is GPT-2 had 1.5 billion parameters, which is sort of like the amount of neurons or the amount of different kind of factors that it considers. GPT-3 had 175 billion. We don't know how many GPT-4 has. They didn't release that, but estimates are that it's a leap over GPT-3, and that also that potentially they're kind of out of data. Now, more data is being created every day, so it's not necessarily that they're out of data completely, but perhaps it's just there's not enough to get like that exponential leap. But also, I think he implied, and this makes sense, that sometimes more data just isn't necessarily better. It doesn't necessarily give you a better answer to get more data, and I elaborate on that again in my recent other video. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that large language models and OpenAI included hit a huge wall, and they are maybe not unable to move forward, but their progress is slowed dramatically, and we don't see anything like what people think maybe GPT-5 should be for 5 or 10 years. That maybe there's another technological development that needs to happen. So what comes about because of this? Let's look at the good. I think probably the biggest thing is for the world to kind of catch up mentally on like, especially when it comes to misinformation being spread and identifying that and helping people adjust to that new reality that we're finding ourselves in right now, this year, 2023. That's probably the only good thing I can think of. Maybe the pause, the people who are in favor of a pause, it just kind of happens naturally. I personally don't think that the pause is a good idea. And there's these 3 dots here because I don't really see a whole lot of good coming from this. I'm sure that there's plenty of people that will be celebrating this if this is the case. I will not be one of them. The bad. Here's what I would say with the bad. Good tech has slowed down. There's a lot of really good use cases that really dramatically can help people's lives that is coming about because of the AI models. And now maybe this, in some cases, this doesn't affect that. In some cases, it likely will. So, just to give an example, there's a bunch of different stuff with regards to health care, saving lives, curing diseases that AI has already shown to be quite proficient at and moving forward rapidly. So perhaps that slows down. To me, that's bad. I think there's also an argument to be made for this could actually be better for bad actors. And the reason for that is that I think that OpenAI moving forward will actually help tamp down the bad AI models, as they have demonstrated to me pretty thoroughly that they do have good intentions, and that if there was a bad model that GPT-4 or GPT-5 could help kind of tamp down, identify, fight back against, that they would work on that and help with that. And so I think that this actually opens the door for bad actors, and it'll make sense when I get to this last bullet point. Let's look at how good is GPT-4 right now? And I would say that it's really freaking good. Like, I was trying to test the other day, it's supposed to be bad at math, and it actually did a pretty good job of math and showing its work, and it got it right. Not like a super complicated thing, but more complicated than what other people were saying it was wrong. And let's see, I need to add the hallucinations here. So, but there are still some things that it struggles with. Math, as we mentioned before, recent events, hallucinations. I think that there's some more. If you want, put them in the comments below if you have any other ideas. But it still struggles with some things, but not a whole lot. It does a whole lot really, really, really well. So I think right now it's actually at a point that is pretty profound, just GPT-4 as it is now. Now, Sam Altman did state that there are other ways in which they are looking to improve it, and I believe them. And but maybe it's just slower. Let's assume for the case of this argument that it's slower. It's just kind of more minor updates that come together more further down the line in terms of years to create a more comprehensive, bigger change, which is kind of what they said. They did say that a lot of their improvements were just a bunch of little ones that kind of all worked together, or to create where a whole is greater than the sum of the parts. How much can it really improve? Now, the plugins, the ChatGPT plugins, actually does have a lot of potential to shore up the weaknesses. Specifically, I shot a video on Wolfram Alpha and math. If those things work well together, and it worked pretty good, then that's a huge weakness. Recent events, there is some way around this to connect it to the internet to some degree, or to pull information from the internet, put it in your own database that's very recent. I do think that would be helpful. I'm not sure about the hallucinations, whether or not like plugins are probably not going to really help with that. This is probably one of their biggest challenges, the hallucinations, and it's a real issue that reduces the value of GPT-4. So I imagine that they're working on it pretty hard, and I'm optimistic that they'll be able to solve it. But who knows? It might take 5 years before they're like, all right, it rarely, if ever, gives hallucinations. Longer context windows. So they increased from GPT-3 to GPT-4, technically the context window by quite a bit, at least like the maximum of 32,000 tokens versus I believe it was 4,000 tokens. So that's an 8x increase, which is an order of magnitude. That's pretty substantial. I don't think that this is really necessary. I know that some people are like, oh, I could, if we had even more with 32,000 tokens, I think that's like 50 to 100 pages of content. If you had even more, you could just put a whole book in there. The problem with that is that more data is not necessarily better. And I think you get diminishing returns, and you kind of water down the things that you want to see if you have these huge context windows and you dump massive amounts of data in there. So I don't necessarily think this is a big improvement. I think the context window right now is quite large, and there's always going to be a limit to it. And so this is a problem that developers and people are going to have to deal with that is being worked on, and I think that there are solutions for it. Recent data, I think this is something that a plugin would be able to help with significantly, and I do think that they seem very resistant to adding a new data set. Maybe it's because they spent so much time and money and energy training GPT-4 on that data set that they had, and recreating that data set and retraining it again might cost them, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's possible that they'll just kind of look to Band-Aid it with plugins. But that still is, to me, kind of a Band-Aid. And maybe that there's some way, Bing does have sort of like use current search results. I think that's helpful. Potentially, I think that they had in GPT-4 also something where it could actually go to a website and use that as a reference. So that's really helpful. Again, I think it's a little bit of a Band-Aid. So, but I don't think this is a huge issue, because I think that, there's, just knowing this limitation means that you can use GPT-4 just fine for pretty much all use cases, almost all use cases, barring the one, to me, the biggest issue, which is the hallucinations. All right. So the biggest area of opportunity for AI, even with this, even if GPT-4 is the exact same level of quality 5 years from now, there's still a crap load of opportunity for, I would say it's not necessarily business opportunity, it's just kind of human opportunity, although I think the context of business makes a lot of sense. And it's what are called as narrow AI models. And these are models that are made for specific situations. I see a lot of models out there that are broad general models that are trying to, be AGI. They're trying to be a generalized intelligence. And while that's great work and that's really, really helpful, I think that there's just so much value you can get by narrowing the focus of an AI model to a specific use case or set of use cases that target a specific market. It's way less expensive to train. You can get higher quality results for way less parameters. And so, I think also you can even consider taking these narrow models and making them large language model size, and the quality that you might get from that. I'm not sure you really need to do that in a lot of cases, but these narrow models are going to, I think, shine over the next 2 or 3 years, regardless of what happens with OpenAI and GPT-4 and GPT-5. I mean, there's so many use cases still to be developed. Think about how many different pieces of software there are being used right now. And every single, that's the amount of quantity of possibilities for narrow AI models, at least, and potentially more, because there's so many different use cases and there's so many different ways, especially with the low cost base models that you can take right now that are being published out there that are open source, that cost $500, $600 to build and train, maybe even less, and still be really, really good as general models. You take that, you kind of train it a bit more for your narrow specific case, and boom, you have a very, very powerful model for a very specific use case. I think this is where a lot of the AI investments should go. And I think that the people who do that are going to be rewarded greatly. I plan on doing that, and more on that another time. So thank you for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe for more videos, and have a great day. Bye.